Good afternoon, everyone. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes.
Hey, everybody, tell us where you're from. Where are you at? Who's joining us today? Grand Rapids, Annandale, Phoenix and Denver. Shout out to Denver. Seattle, Indiana. Y'all coming from everywhere. Washington, Atlanta, Kansas City. Good representation from all over the country today. I saw Hawaii.
All right. We didn't have anyone from Hawaii yesterday except for one of our speakers.
Right. It might be Jesse. No.
It might be Jesse.
All right. Chicago. I'm in Milwaukee today, so I just came through Chicago. Indianapolis, Orlando. I saw Jesse's name go by fast again. I bet it was him.
It is Jesse.
Colorado in the house. Hi, April. All right.
All right, so we've got about 70 people. I think we can go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Unmasking Microaggressions. We are delighted to have you join us for day 2 of NAA's second annual Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Awareness Week. My name is Stephanie Hurst, and I'm the Member Programs Manager here for the National Apartment Association Education Institute. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping points. This presentation is being recorded and will be posted on the webinars page of the NAA website later this week. During the discussion, you may type questions into the chat box on your screen, and we will share them with our presenter. We've left time at the end for questions. Finally, DE&I Awareness Week is brought to you by Entrada. If you want to switch to the next slide. Laura Butler, Chief People Officer at Entrada, has sent over a brief video to welcome you to today. If you want to go ahead and play that for us.
Hi, my name is Laura Butler, and I'm the Chief People Officer here at Entrada. We want to welcome you to the NAA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Awareness Week. On behalf of the entire team at Entrada, we want to thank NAA for showing leadership in creating this forum. We couldn't be more proud to sponsor this event and the important conversations that will be taking place. To find out more about Entrada and our team, please visit entrada.com/careers.
Thank you, Laura and Entrada, for sponsoring this week and today's session. And now I will turn it over to NAA's DE&I Committee Chair, Marcy French, to introduce today's wonderful speaker. Marcy?
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm really excited for today's topic. It's new and edgy, and I think it's just what we need for just right now. We're going to be talking today about unmasking microaggressions. Snap judgments are easy to make, but microaggressions may negatively impact your interactions with the rental housing industry. We're going to learn how to identify, mitigate, and cope with microaggressions. And we're going to do that today with Dr. Ryan Warner. Dr. Ryan Warner is the founder and CEO of RC Warner Consulting, LLC. He is a licensed psychologist, researcher, speaker, and consultant specializing in assisting teams with creating inclusive cultures that maximize growth potential. Using an individualized, tailored approach, Warner improves leadership, diversity, and wellness policies and procedures to improve company cultures. As a true academic, he received a Ph.D. in counseling psychology from Marquette University and shares his knowledge of microaggressions, anti-racism, psychological resilience, and unconscious bias during speaking engagements, trainings, and in peer-reviewed journals to accelerate meaningful change within organizations of all sizes. Ryan, tell us what you have for us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here today to talk about such an important topic. And before I begin, it is essential to mention that today we're going to talk about a challenging topic that may lead to discomfort for some. And we're talking about diversity, microaggressions, bias. We know that a safe amount of discomfort actually leads to growth. So I challenge you today to engage as much as possible, mitigate any distractions, and honestly reflect on your previous experience so you can grow from the information provided. So with that said, let me pose a question to you. What would it look like if we came together no matter what cultural identities we hold to create more inclusive workplaces and communities. How would our world look different than it does today? We have to be willing to address these topics with cultural humility as well as empathy so that we can improve our interactions within our workplaces and create more inclusive environments. So with that said today, I invite you on today's experience and journey as we talk about unmasking microaggressions. With that said, just a short disclaimer. So it's important to know that statements of fact of opinion are expressed of those of the presenter, myself, and not are the representations or position of any other entities. So let's talk a little bit about the objectives that will be reviewed. So I'm going to break this up into 3 different parts. And unfortunately, we only have 60 minutes total that we're going to spend together today. So part 1 is going to focus on listening and learning. Okay, so we're going to first identify some terminology related to microaggressions and also talk about what a conscious bias really means so we can enhance our awareness. Part 2 will then focus on how do we act and respond when microaggressions occur? What do we do when we identify the blind spots that we all have, okay? Then from there, part 3 will focus more on enhancing the rental housing industry culture. So how can we as professionals come together to propel our industry forward so that it can be more equitable and also inclusive for all individuals? So with that, let's get into listening and learning. As a psychologist, I want to ground you all today. I know that we're getting into the week after a federal holiday, and now we're coming back in the workplace. And ultimately, I want to help you all just ground yourself right now so you can give your full attention. So with that, I would like to do a quick activity with you. Wherever you're at, no matter if you're in an office or you're at a coffee shop or in your vehicle, I would like you, if you can, to close your eyes and take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. I want you to imagine for a second that you are finally given the opportunity to go on the vacation of your dreams. I want you to think about where would you go on this vacation? You can go anywhere in the world. Imagine you are packing your clothes and then you immediately rush to the airport. Once you get to the airport and check in, you were just able to make your flight in time. As you walk onto the airplane, there's a pilot at the front door and they greet you with a smile. Once your plane lands, you go straight to the hotel. You have a lot of luggage, so you ask a hotel employee to lift your luggage upstairs to your beautiful suite. You give them a tip for their kind efforts. You then choose to go to an extravagant restaurant to eat lunch. As you arrive, you notice a couple is sitting at the table behind you. And as you turn around, you see someone getting on one knee to ask the love of their life for their hand in marriage. They say yes, and the entire restaurant begins to applaud. Seeing a special moment puts a smile on your face, and you walk over to tell the couple, congratulations. So far, your vacation is off to a great start. Now, for those who chose to close your eyes, I appreciate if you can please open them. And I want everyone to type in the chat box, where did you choose to go for the vacation of your dreams? Where is the destination? Now we have 106 people on the call today, so hopefully we get 106 responses. We have Greece, Mexico. We have New York City, Italy. A couple people went to Italy. Nice. Caribbean, Sydney, Spain, Dubai. I always want to go to Dubai. Disney, the beach, Hawaii. Cool. So it seems like you all went to some really cool places. I want you to recall back when you were conducting this activity in your mind. And I want you to think about, remember when you were rushing to get to the airport and you were just able to get to the airport in time? I'm sure that a lot of people can relate. When you walked onto the plane, there was a pilot at the front door and they greeted you with a smile. I'm curious, what did that pilot look like in your mind? Describe that individual. Were they tall? Were they short? Were they of a particular racial ethnic background? What did that pilot that greeted you look like in your mind? Let's type in the chat box. So tall white man with gray hair, older white man of middle age. By the way, there are no right or wrong answers as well. Let's see, tall, thin male, white woman, tall white man. So Marcy was on the plane today and she indicated the pilot that she saw today was a tall, white, gray-haired person. Tall, white, older man. Patty says, I just imagine the smile. I don't recall the face. So there's a lot of individuals thus far who indicated a tall, white male came up in their mind when they imagined that pilot. For anybody, once again, there are no right or wrong answers. Did anybody imagine a Black younger woman? You can just type in yes or no in the chat. Okay, so now fast forward, you arrived at your destination. You then went to a beautiful hotel. And you had a lot of luggage, so a hotel employee offered to lift your luggage upstairs to your beautiful suite. What did that person look like in your mind? What are the demographics of that bellhop or that hotel employee? Let's describe that individual. Hispanic woman, short man, younger man, white man, young man, kind of white, young man, white, short man, young man. Okay, so probably have the consensus that a lot of individuals identified a young man of a certain background to lift their luggage upstairs to your beautiful suite. So for anyone, did you imagine an older Caucasian woman? Once again, there are no right or wrong answers. Older Caucasian woman for anybody. Okay, so the consensus here is no. Okay, so now fast forward again, you're kind of hungry, you choose to go to an extravagant restaurant to eat lunch. And as you arrive, you turn around and you see someone proposing to someone else. What was that couple? Who was getting on one knee to ask the love of their life for their hand in marriage? Describe that couple in your mind. Young Black couple, man and woman, Indian couple. Young man was asking a young woman. Young Black couple. Let's be more specific. So when you say couple, are you talking about, let's be more specific about maybe the background of that couple. Attractive man and woman. Two Black women, says Donna. Okay, so suddenly we got some really diverse responses here. For anybody, was it a gay interracial male couple for anyone? Say yes or no. So I appreciate everybody for engaging in this activity with me. Ultimately, there are many factors that may impact our beliefs about others. Our background, our cultural experiences, how we grew up, the media that we watch and consume. all contribute to how we make decisions about the world around us. We often make snap judgments of people that we meet, characterizing them according to gender, social, and other characteristics. And within milliseconds, we judge whether someone is like us and belongs to our in-group, or not like us and belongs to our out-group. This is called unconscious bias. Unconscious bias, also known as implicit bias, refers to our attitudes, perceptions, and stereotypes that influence our understandings, our actions, and our behaviors when interacting with various identities. All of us have it, and it impacts our decisions without us even realizing it. And today, we need to not only be aware of overt discrimination that certain historically marginalized groups may face, and how systems of oppression may contribute to these biases, but we also need to understand the covert discrimination as well. Those things that are a little bit more underneath the surface that may be more challenging to identify. So as individuals within the rental housing industry, I'm sure that we are aware that there are laws that prohibit discrimination in housing. For instance, I'll give you some examples. In New York, a bank or a property owner cannot inquire about a person's criminal record. There are also laws that prohibit discrimination on the basis of immigration status or lawful occupation. So we also know that there are obviously laws that prohibit us from discriminating towards individuals of certain racial ethnic groups as well. And this also has been extended to include the wearing of different ethnic hairstyles, such as dreadlocks, as well as other facets of identity as well. So although overt discrimination within the US, within the housing policies have been outlawed, there's still systemic racism within the housing economic system, as well as within our interactions that may contribute to this bias to continue to perpetuate. Let's talk about some statistics specifically. So in 2020, there's a statistic that showed that there was 28,000 individuals who reported complaints of housing discrimination within the US. And of this number, rental-related housing discrimination complaints were actually the most frequent. So this may be primarily due to the fact that rental transactions are the most frequent type of housing transaction. And the simplicity of the transaction can make it easier to identify or suspect discrimination. There's also recent studies that show that Black and Latinx renters are more likely than whites to pay application fees and security deposits. And about 93% of renters of color had to pay a security deposit last year, while 85% of white renters had to, according to recent reports. Additionally, we know that renters of color had to put more money down for security deposits compared to white renters. So looking at these facts, looking at these statistics, why is this important? So in the examples mentioned, it may not be that the property owner was intentionally trying to be discriminatory towards a certain group. However, their biases may have influenced how they treated that individual that they came in contact with. And as professionals within the rental housing industry, no one wants to be racist or sexist or prejudiced towards a certain group. And if we came in contact with overt discrimination, we as caring, helping people may feel the need that we need to step up and say something and call out injustice when we see it. However, we need to not only do that when overt discrimination arises, but also covert discrimination as well. So that's important to keep in mind throughout. And I see that some individuals are muted. The host, can you please make sure everybody's muted so we don't have any background noise? That'd be great. So moving forward, let's watch a short video about blind spots and microaggressions. And again, when talking about microaggressions, we're going to define that a little bit more specifically moving forward. But it's important to note that we all have blind spots. And having blind spots does not make us a bad person. It just makes us human, okay? From a psychological perspective, we actually need to form judgments about others very quickly so that we can ultimately navigate the world and be able to identify what is a threat in our environment and what is not a threat, okay? However, this in turn may negatively impact our interactions with others. So let's learn more about the blind spots that we all hold and then identify what we can do about it.
Considering her as a candidate.
Don't trust
She's a woman.
She's a woman.
This is a man's
She's
job.
clearly not educated.
Really? Does she even speak English?
That's not me. I'm not like that. You call it an honest mistake. Science calls it a blind spot. Our unconscious mind is a mysterious and powerful thing. It makes 90% of our decisions without us even knowing it. Our brains are overloaded with 11 million pieces of information every second. Yet we can only process about 40 of them. So we're wired to make cognitive shortcuts, using past experiences to make assumptions. And you know what happens when we assume? Our unconscious mind can put us on autopilot, determining where we sit, who we eat lunch with, who we turn to for advice, and who we choose to offer a helping hand. Living our lives with blind spots can put us in a tunnel. Same point of view, same decisions, same outcomes. We can find ourselves trapped in the land of snap judgments and misconceptions. We've all been on both the giving and receiving end of blind spots. Think about it. Who's talented? Who's able? Who can I trust? Who belongs? We've all been there. Blind spots are part of the human condition. Our choices have consequences for us and the people we interact with. By accepting that blind spots exist, we can stop. Imagine what possibilities exist if we could do it all over again. Different perspectives, inclusive relationships, diverse networks, better outcomes, seeing people for who they really are. People like you, with unlimited potential. We all have blind spots. Once you accept that you have them, you can choose to do something about it. It's time to check your blind spots and focus on what's possible.
So when we talk about blind spots, I think that's a perfect transition to talk about microaggressions as well, because these blind spots may in turn contribute to us committing some microaggressions. So let's start with defining microaggressions and understanding a little bit more about the history of this term. So the initial concept of microaggressions is connected to pathological stereotypes, power structures, structural racism, and multiple forms of racial prejudice. Chester Pierce, a prominent African-American Harvard-trained psychiatrist, was actually the first to describe these covert acts of microaggressions in the 1960s. He initially defined microaggressions as Black, white, racial interactions that are characterized by white put-downs done in an automatic, pre-conscious, or unconscious fashion. However, since the 1960s, both popular use as well as the academic study of microaggressions have expanded and grown rapidly. This definition has now been expanded to describe this phenomenon when it occurs between various groups and not just racial groups. However, it's used when there exists stigma and power imbalances. Today, microaggressions are described as everyday verbal, nonverbal, and environmental snubs or insults which communicate derogatory or negative messages towards the person being targeted. In many cases, these hidden covert messages may invalidate the group identity of those targeted, and in turn communicate that that other individual on the receiving end is lesser than the person who committed the microaggression. Now, this is not done most of the time in a conscious or deliberate way, right? That's why microaggressions are very tricky. I look at microaggressions as mosquito bites. Has anyone ever experienced a mosquito bite? Let's say you receive a mosquito bite in your hand. And when you receive that initial mosquito bite, it's kind of annoying, right? But you brush it off and you go on with your day. But imagine receiving that same mosquito bite over and over and over again. Then that becomes impactful. So when we talk about microaggressions, we have to understand, number one, they're subjective. So the same person of the same background or similar person of the same background could experience the same type of comment or behavior. And one may experience that microaggression and say, hey, I felt offended by that. Another person may say, oh, it's not a big deal. So it gets a little tricky. And I'll give you all a personal example. So when I was seeking my bachelor's degree in 2000 and around 2010. And when I was a freshman on campus, I went to the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, a big, huge, predominantly white Big Ten university. And I remember walking down the street, and it was my first day of the semester, and I was really excited about this new environment. I was excited to meet new people. I was excited to grow and learn more, in this higher education institution. And I remember I would walk down the street and I would just be going to my class. I would be wearing some jogging shorts or, my cooler shoes I had on. And people would come up to me and they say, hey, you must be on the basketball team. When's the next basketball game? And at first I would look at them like, what do you mean? I'm not on the basketball team. I'll be confused. And they'd be like, oh, okay, sorry about that. I just thought you were on the team. And at first, I just brushed it off. It wasn't a big deal. But then I started to know that a lot of people start to believe I was on the basketball team. Now, you don't see how tall I am sitting down right now, but I'm almost 6'4". I'm a Black male. And with that, I started to actually get privileges from people thinking that I was a basketball team. I got into the coolest clubs. People let me cut the line. People wanted me to go to their parties. So I was like, hey, this is kind of cool. However, over time, it started to become impactful. So people would come up to me and they say, hey, I'm curious why you're in this class. I didn't think you would be in this class. And I would look at them and I would look around and I would see it would be all people who do not look like me, all white individuals. And I started to see that they would start to doubt my intellectual abilities. They were confused about why I was in certain classes, assuming that I had to be an athlete to be at this premier institution. And when I started to experience that from not only my peers, I also started experiencing that from my instructors and my professors. And over time, that started to be impactful to my well-being. I started to doubt myself. Hey, am I really meant to be here? And that would start to impact how I view myself and just my overall well-being. So fast forward, these microaggressions continued throughout my life. Even though I was able to obtain a Ph.D. by the age of 27 years old, people would always come up to me and say, there's no way you could be a Ph.D. student. I wouldn't assume that. And over time, these little mosquito bites kept biting over and over and over again. So the reason I tell that story is because we all may commit microaggressions, and that's okay. But what we have to do is learn from those experiences. Identify our blind spots to ensure that doesn't impact, the clients that we have or the work that we do within, our particular industry. So let's give some specific examples about what microaggressions may look like, both verbally, behaviorally, as well as environmentally. So you can look on the screen right now. I'm not going to read this word for word, but here's some examples of verbal microaggressions, for instance. Oh, I didn't think that you would want to live here. Maybe if you are showing a particular property in a certain area, right? When I look at you, I don't see color. That one really stands out to me because if anyone knows this comedian, his name is Trevor Noah. And there was someone on his show a couple of years ago, and she indicated she was a white woman, and she told Trevor, who's a biracial man, he told her, he's like, hey, Trevor, you talk a lot about race a lot, but myself as a white woman, I don't see color. And he asked her, he was like, okay, if you don't see color, what do you do at a stoplight? And I thought that was really funny, right? Because we often say we don't see color or, hey, everybody's the same. But we know actually from a neurological perspective, we do see color. It's actually neurologically, it's the first thing we see when we see someone. And ultimately, when we say that, it's not that we're trying to do any harm, right? We're trying to say, hey, we see everyone equal, we're not discriminatory, but in turn, that may invalidate the experiences of certain individuals. Now, today, I'm focusing a lot on race, and I'm doing that purposely, okay? Because oftentimes race is the most challenging facet of identity to talk about. And if we can enhance our muscles around being comfortable about talking about race, then that's going to translate into other aspects of identity as well. For instance, ability status, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, et cetera. So I just wanted to point that out. And today, with our short amount of time that we have, I'm not going to be able to give every example of every facet of identity, but I did want to provide some examples that may be prevalent to you in your particular industry. So looking in this chart, just type in the chat box, have you all, well, I guess what really stands out to you, like the verbal microaggressions, behavioral microaggressions? Let's type the phrase that maybe you heard or maybe accidentally said before, or maybe witnessed in your professional life. Did any of these phrases or similar phrases stand out to you? And if so, let's put that. So Philip indicated verbal. The verbal microaggressions are the ones that maybe Philip may identify with. Definitely verbal, says Jess. Yeah, you speak so well. Where did you learn English? Yeah, you don't sound like you look. Definitely heard that one before. Yeah, so oftentimes, yeah, someone said verbally may be easier to identify. Yeah, I definitely see that, right? Because those environmental may be a little bit more subtle than the verbal sometimes, right? Like the background that you may have. I've been in offices, and give you a background, I recently bought my first home 2 months ago. And me and my family, we built our home. It took about like 10 months. And I remember that I went into the sales office. I said, hey, I'm interested in living in this neighborhood, and he looked at me kind of weird because I walked in there. I had I just came from working out. So I had my tattoos showing, everything like that. It was kind of hot outside. And he looked at me like, oh, is this guy really trying to live in this neighborhood? Like, I got that look. He didn't say that verbally, but behaviorally, I saw that he changed up a little bit when I walked in because it's mostly, white neighborhood, new development area. And I remember I was like, yeah, I'm interested, this neighborhood. He was like, well, you have to make this amount of money to live here, and I think he doubted that I was able to live in this area. And I thought that was interesting, right? Like I left it off, but I can see how that could be impactful, right? Because when I went back there again, he really didn't pay me that much mind. Like he spent a lot of his attention on the other white couple that was there. And even though I was really interested in living in this neighborhood, it seemed like he didn't think I was serious, So with that, these microaggressions definitely, occur every single day. And sometimes we don't realize that. So it's important for us to just learn to identify our blind spots a little bit better. So moving forward, let's do a quick poll. So please, let's pull up poll 1. I want to ask everyone a question. So I'll give some time to pull up poll 1. So you all should see it in your end now. So the first question is, I have witnessed or experienced a microaggression during my work within the rental housing industry. So please select whatever response that you have, and we'll give about 15 seconds to respond to this question. Okay, so Denise says, Denise doesn't see this on the screen. Everyone should see the question on the screen. If not, maybe you can put your question, you can put the response in the chat. Okay, can we pause and now show the results? Okay, so for those who were able to respond, we have 59% noted occasionally. So they occasionally witnessed or experienced a microaggression during their work. So more than half of individuals on this call. So that really stands out to me. And 23% noted often. Wow. So right there, let's see if I can do the math. That's over 80% of individuals on this call indicated occasionally or often they have witnessed or experienced a microaggression within their work. That's powerful. So thank you for sharing that. Okay. So moving forward, let's talk about what contributes, to these microaggressions. So after watching that video, and engaging in this discussion and dialogue today, hopefully we're a little bit more aware of the judgments we may have. Like everyone who attended at the beginning, you all were able to do that activity, right? And the purpose of that activity was to identify, hey, we sometimes think about our past experiences, right? And that brings in how we imagine certain things and the assumptions that we come up with. I'll say anecdotally, 90% plus noted that they saw a white male as a pilot, okay? There were a lot of individuals, I'll say another over at least 80% noted that there was a young man that brought your luggage upstairs to your beautiful suite, right? So we utilize those experiences, that we have, our upbringing, what we see on TV, et cetera, media, and that comes up with the assumptions that we have. So that's a way to be more aware of the blind spots. Another way to be more aware of blind spots is identifying what is involved in culture. There's a lot of things involved in culture, right? So let's look at the screen right now. We can see the cultural iceberg. I think about culture as an iceberg because only about 10% of culture is easily visible, okay? So right now, the way I'm talking, you may see me on the screen, you probably assume that I identify as a man, okay? You probably assume that I'm a person of color based on my skin color, right? There are certain things that you see externally and that contributes to a assumption that you have about me and my background. However, underneath the surface, there are so many other facets of identity, okay? However, we often assume what's externally, we assume things internally. So for instance, I'll give you an example. If we think about the way someone speaks, we may assume that they hold a certain level of education. We may assume that the way someone is dressed, that they have a certain level of socioeconomic status. I'll give another example from my personal life. In high school, I worked at Best Buy, and my job was to sell electronics. And it was commission-based, so I really wanted to succeed so that I can pay my way through to get my first car when I was 16 years old. And when individuals walked into Best Buy, I found myself gravitating towards individuals in the suits, and the individuals in the nice dresses, okay? And I assumed that they had more money than the individuals who were walking in with ripped jeans. That assumption did not work in my favor because those individuals walking in with ripped jeans, they actually were the ones that were buying the 85-inch TVs. They were the ones that were actually spending a lot of money in Best Buy. So I lost out on a lot of just financial gain because of my assumptions about someone's external appearance, okay? Just based on my assumptions about the correlation between how you dress and your socioeconomic status. So once again, that's just a personal real life example that we do this all the time and we do this very quickly within milliseconds, as I mentioned, okay? But it's important to understand, these blind spots that we have, and that's gonna lead into how we respond. Moving forward, let's talk about why microaggressions matter, okay? Here are some examples of why they matter. They contribute to loneliness, they contribute to psychological symptoms as well. Once again, not just race, but also ability status, socioeconomic status, et cetera. Before we go into our next section, let's just want to show this quick picture. So be careful of stereotypes. Only one of them is a convicted felon. If no one knows who this is, on the right, it's Martha Stewart. And on the left, LL Cool J. So that's funny. So let's talk about action and response. So I'm going to provide some practical strategies that we can take, okay, when we make mistakes, when we know this is going to happen. What do we do? Number one, let's try not to be defensive. That can be very hard, right? Because none of us want to be racist, none of us want to be sexist, et cetera, okay? So we're often defensive. No, you took that the wrong way. That's not what I meant, okay? That may come up. But let's try not to be defensive. Let's be open to hearing the point of view if someone does point this out. Verbally, if they don't point it out, we can also be aware behaviorally that someone may act a little bit differently if we say something that comes off that may not be the right way of saying something, right? So they may be a little bit more closed off, okay? They may also, change up their nonverbals. It's important to be aware of it. We need to validate the other person's experience, knowing that everyone's going to respond differently, and knowing that it's okay if we made a mistake. Let's learn from it. So let's acknowledge our biases, acknowledge our blind spots, and let's clarify misinterpreted statements. Hey, you don't look like you would live here. You see somebody maybe changing up their nonverbals. Hey, I'm sorry, did I say something wrong? What I meant was this. I'm sorry if that came off the wrong way, right? So clarifying those misinterpreted statements or behaviors. Everyone is going to be also given a toolkit as well at the end of today's session. And you're going to have these particular steps as well to follow. Okay. Moving forward, let's say yourself, if you experienced a microaggression. I gave some experiences of mine. I see everyone's talking in the chat box right now. And some individuals indicated that their experiences of what they went through as well. So if we were experiencing microaggressions, what do we do? Okay, so here are some strategies on how to respond. Number one, ask for clarification. Once again, going back to that example that I gave, hey, you must be on the basketball team. I actually received this last year when I was in the airport. And I'm like, no, I'm not on the basketball team. I'm 30 years old. I'm not in school. Like, why would you think I'm on the college basketball team? So I didn't say that, but this is what I was thinking in my head. But what I did was they came up to me randomly in the airport. I guess I was wearing a hoodie with a particular university logo on it. And they said, hey, are you on the university's team? And this is a complete stranger, by the way. All I said was, oh, no, I'm not. But I'm curious, what made you think that? Just a very inquisitive, type of response. Hey, I'm curious, what made you come up to me? What made you say that? Right then and there, that person changed their behaviors up. And they said, oh, well, I guess I just assumed. And then they were kind of tongue-tied. They didn't know what to say. And this was a complete stranger, but I guarantee you they walked away, probably second-guessing coming to a stranger, assuming that they belong to a certain background or a certain team, just based on how they look, right? So that inquisitive question, that hey, just tell me more. What made you say that? That can also be a way to open dialogue. On the screen, we also have some other ways to effectively respond. This next slide really stands out to me. Express your feelings. So this may be more helpful if it's someone in your in-group. Say, for instance, maybe a child or a parent or a family member. If you hear them say a microaggression or say something, that may be a way that you maybe can feel a little bit more vulnerable to say, hey, when you said X comment, I felt a certain way, right? Or, hey, I saw that you said this thing, or, and right now we're talking a lot about verbal microaggressions, but I saw that you responded this way. In my experience, this is actually the case. Okay, so for instance, maybe you're showing an apartment complex, and maybe one of your colleagues says, oh, people of color probably don't live here. Then that's a way that you can challenge that. Well, in my experience, this, right? To be able to provide factual data and evidence, to respectfully challenge that. It's important to know that obviously there are a lot of barriers and hurdles to challenging microaggressions. However, it does not have to be confrontational, okay? The examples that I gave were very warm, they were very open, they were inquisitive, right? They're inviting, and those are ways to enhance the probability that effective dialogue can be had. So with the last poll that we have, let's bring that up. And I want you all to identify the main action that you are committed to moving forward to enhance dialogue about microaggressions within your organization or association or workplace. What is one thing that you're going to walk away today from doing more of? How can this just be not another webinar that you watch and forget about? How can you actually take an action and be deliberate and intentional when you end this call today? What are you committed to doing? Let's spend about 10 more seconds and identify the action that you plan to take. Okay, so we have 46% noted that they will listen respectfully, seek to understand, and listen harder when you initially disagree. That's great. So, yeah, and thank you, Linda, for that comment. You know, these are all great options. The goal of this was just to walk away with one thing. We know that we're actually able to, you know, enhance our habits and create new habits when we just focus on one specific thing. So hopefully you all, you know, engage in all of those actions, but I urge you all to walk away and be committed to at least one of them today. Lastly, as our time wraps up, how can we be change agents within the rental housing industry? What can we do to shift our organizational culture and our workplaces so that change can be made? And the change starts with us. Here are some actions or action steps for organizations that they can possibly take to ensure that diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just a thing that you check off, but also something that's actually embedded within the culture, embedded within everything that you do within the rental housing industry. So number one is set the accountability, you know, identify that, hey, you know, we know that when teams value diversity, equity, and inclusion, they actually are more profitable. They come up with more innovative ideas, and they're overall, you know, create more inviting, inclusive, and fulfilling workplaces. So this has been shown throughout the literature, throughout the data. Okay, so there are a lot of pros to valuing and, you know, celebrating diversity, equity, inclusion. I didn't go over the specific definitions of DE&I, but ultimately the way I look at diversity is, and some of you all may have heard this, some may have not, but diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance at the party. And equity is being a part of the party planning. So if you walk into a party, let's say a workplace retreat or a party that's going on, and you will look around and you say, well, there's nobody dancing at this party. Well, the individuals on the board who came up with the party planning maybe only listen to the same music because they're from the same background. Hence, no one is really going to feel that they belong in that party, right? So you have to ensure that whoever's on your board, whether you have a diversity, equity, inclusion board or a committee or trying to get these initiatives, you know, in place, you know, ensure that they come from different backgrounds, right? Because that's going to help individuals feel more belonged and feel a part of that party that you're trying to create. So with that, today we talked about unconscious bias. We did an activity at the beginning so you can be more aware of your blind spots. We also talked about the potential impact of microaggressions. And we left with some ways that we can respond and when we experience a microaggression, and also things that we can do when we make mistakes as well. And lastly, we ended with talking about what we can do to enhance our organization or our association or our workplace by celebrating and valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And with that, next time you go on a vacation of your dreams and you're kind of late to the airport and you see this pilot that looks a little bit different than what you may have imagined, or the bellhop, you know, doesn't fit, you know, your particular image of what a bellhop should look like. Or you see a couple, you know, someone proposed to someone else that's a little bit maybe different than your past experiences. Just bring those biases to light, identify the biases and blind spots that you have and be committed to action. And I'll end by saying this quote: silence is compliance and only enhances and encourages injustice in the world. If we want to make change, if we want to ensure that everyone has the right to fair and equal housing, if we want to ensure that diversity, equity, inclusion is embedded within our organizational culture, we have to do something. We have to be in attention. And I encourage everyone on this call to do something when you end, whether that's going on Netflix tonight and watching a different video or different movie to learn about a different culture, whether that's reading a different new type of book that maybe in the past you wouldn't have read, but to enhance your education and your knowledge about someone of a certain background or a particular cultural group. Whether that's going in tomorrow to work and saying, hey, you know, let's take this a little bit more seriously and let's start to engage in action, right? Whatever that looks like for you, I urge you to take some action today. And so hopefully this experience was impactful for you. With that, I would like to provide a toolkit for everyone so that they have these resources. If you are on a computer and have access to a smartphone, you can just put up your smartphone to the screen. You can turn on your camera and you can scan the QR code. If you're unsure how to do that, no worries. The host will put this particular link in the chat box. So everyone can just click on the link and you'll have access to that PDF document for life. So I'll give a couple more seconds for everyone to either scan the QR code or also click on the link in the chat. And this should also be emailed out later as well. Lastly, I would really appreciate your feedback. You know, definitely is important to continue these initiatives and also get feedback from everyone. So please, the survey only takes 2 minutes. If you can please just provide your feedback and your experience today. We're going to put that link in the chat box, and also you can scan the QR code. Lastly, if anyone wanted to reach out directly to me to provide any additional feedback, that's my email. Feel free to follow me on LinkedIn if you have LinkedIn, or also visit my website to learn more about my organization. So now we can open it up to any Q&A with the remaining time that we have. Thank you.
All right, Ryan. That was amazing. And we do have a few questions here that came from the team. Somebody asked a question about whether the recording was going to be available. I just want to remind everyone it will be available on the website. All of the DE&I webinars this week, just like last year, will be available on the NAA website under Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. All right, so a couple questions for you, Ryan. This one's long and it's very thought out. Can you speak more to microaggressions and how it plays to power, and how that power dynamic relies on a historically dominant identity versus a historically minoritized identity? I feel like some folks might walk away thinking a microaggression is any kind of slight as opposed to one grounded in marginalized identity or identities.
Wow, that's a great question. And with the time we have left, I probably won't be able to answer that totally. However, you know, today I focus a lot more on race, obviously. Once again, that was intentional. If we think about systemic racism or just the term racism, racism inherently means, you know, power differential, you know, and ultimately, you know, there's the only way, you know, someone can truly be racist, you know, is have a power differential between the person that the person with power and privilege historically, right? So we know that historically with the United States, individuals who identify as white, you know, heterosexual, et cetera, and, you know, commit that racial discriminatory mark towards someone of less power, historically systemic less power, right? Then that's the true term of like what racism means. And when we talk about microaggressions, right, it's all about the power, the person who has the power and utilizing that power to mitigate the experiences of someone else. Okay, so that's going to take, you know, that could be a whole another dialogue and discussion. But it's important to know that as someone who commits a microaggression, I do not have the power to say if that's a microaggression or not. Okay, I'm not able to say, oh, well, that person took it the wrong way. That's not what they meant. I didn't commit a microaggression. The person who has the power to decide if it's a microaggression is the person on the other end. And that's really important, okay? So therefore, the first step that I said is we cannot be defensive, okay? Because we do not have the power, no matter our background, no matter our racial ethnic, background at all, or the different privileges that we all have. We don't have the power to say that that wasn't a microaggression or not. Only the person on the other end. So that's really important to consider and keep in mind.
All right, next question. Do you have any suggestions to get leadership on board with a diversity audit?
Yep, so yeah, the number one, I use diversity audit on the slide, but when I actually conduct a diversity audit through my company, we actually call it something different, right? Because when someone comes in and say, oh, an external consultant is conducting an audit, then that's kind of scary, right? Like, oh, there's something wrong, and they're figuring out all the issues, that's going on. But instead, we're also identifying the strengths. What does your organization do well at? What do we need to continue to do as well, so that we can not only succeed, but also thrive, right, within our industry, right? So to get leadership on board, number one, showing evidence, showing data, okay? It's going to be very important. What is the data? What are statistics out there, for you, whatever problem you're trying to solve, okay? Whether that's creating more diverse teams, whatever problem that you're trying to solve, right? Bringing that data, and also getting other people on board. So if not just one person going to the CEO's door, how can we get 10, 20 people? How can we do a survey to see if people really think this is going to be valuable, right? That's also ways, to get leadership on board. But, true systemic change needs to start from the top down, okay? So it's important that if we're not able to totally shift our system, if we're not at that power, within our organization, we can all take small steps, to make change. It may not be shifting policy, but it may be something else. It may be, calling out, when the CEO or when a higher level leader, is discriminatory towards a certain group, right? In a respectful way. So there's something that we can all do. However, to make true systemic change, it needs to start from the top down.
Thank you, Ryan. That wraps up the couple questions. I know we have a couple minutes left, and I'm going to give it back to Stephanie to tell us more about the rest of the week.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. So we're having a challenge for DE&I Awareness Week, and we want you to participate. So tell us what you learned from today's session. I'm actually going to send some updates here in the chat real quick. So use hashtag NAADEI week and post about what you learned on today's session and on how to create more inclusive workplaces. All right, next slide. And next, join us tomorrow at 2 p.m. for day 3 of DE&I Awareness Week with Ebony Butler and her presentation on leadership's role in promoting inclusivity. And next slide, please. We are pleased to announce that a DE&I bundle is now available on our education platform, Visto. I just dropped that link into the chat so you can check that out there. We just launched that as of this morning. All right, and next slide. We are currently calling for applications for the Diversity Leadership Program and Leadership Lyceum. Deadline to apply for both of these programs is November 18th. And next Monday, we'll begin accepting applications for the 2023 Excellence Awards and 20 in their 20s class of 2023. So please put these dates in your calendar. We want to celebrate and recognize you at Apartmentalize in 2023. Thank you again for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow for day 3 of DE&I Awareness Week. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.